and I will start in yeah, start in 3, 2, 1. Cool. So I'm going to start with a small thought experiment. Abhijeeth, Joel, and Ashu, this is to you. You're not supposed to respond, obviously, but still. Imagine there's a fiery beast outside your door, right? And you're sitting inside, and you know that this beast is going to eat you. You know the moment you step out, or if you wait for long enough before it comes in, it is going to come and rip you or your family members or your kids to pieces, right? And while you're inside cowering in fear, you get a text message from God. And God is like, just say yes, and I will vaporize it for you. What would you do? We think most humans would say, yeah, go ahead, kill it. We need to live, right? And that is the principle on which we stand. And that is why we think we should kill all carnivorous animals. Okay, so what are we going to do exactly? What is our model? First of all, who are we? We are God. We're saying we have the power to choose who to kill, where to kill, when to kill. So we don't think there's any debate about mechanization, about how we're going to kill these animals or anything like that. We can kill anyone that we want, right? So who are we going to kill? We're going to kill all carnivores. What about omnivores? We say, given that they're now human or humanoid or whatever, they have the right to choose. If they say they're going to eat grass or herbivore stuff, cool. If they're going to eat animals, we'd kill them as well. What about humans, like non-veg humans? We say, okay, they also have the right to choose. If they say we can shift to a vegetarian diet, cool. If not, we'd be happy to kill all non-veg humans as well. And even though this sounds very extreme, we're very proud to stand on this principle of protecting innocent people, right? So first of all, we need to talk about what this animal world looks like, right? So we say it looks like this. First of all animals have become humanoid. They have the ability to think and so on. That's not very interesting. So these guys potentially have rights. They are equivalent to humans in the society. They have some amount of right to life, right to self-defense, right to choice, etc., etc. But the main thing I want to focus on is what carnivores look like in this world. These carnivores look like animals that are going around stalking people, potentially going into people's houses, forming groups, forming packs, and in dark alleys or on the street, hunting down the most young, the most defenseless, the most innocent people, and ripping them apart and eating them. And we think that is not a world we're willing to live in. That is not a world that we should defend, right? So we're going to make two broad claims in our case and in my speech. Firstly, we're going to talk about principles, why it's a principle like requirement for us to go and kill these animals. Secondly, we're going to talk about how this makes the world better. Firstly, principles, right? The first principle we stand on is that rights are a bargain. Human rights are not fundamental, they're not existential. Because we think OP is going to come and say, look, these people have a right to life, so you can't do this, so on and so forth, right? So first thing we say when we're talking about rights is that rights are a human-made concept, right? You're not biologically born with rights. So that means we have we can think about who deserves rights and who doesn't. It's not as if you're biologically born with them. So when do we say something deserves rights? We think that getting rights is a bargain in the sense that when you are endowed with human rights, as in you are given the ability to make free choices, or you're given a life of dignity, that also comes with a compromise. And that compromise is that you're going to allow other people to also enjoy from the benefits of those rights. That is to say, if you are given choice, you're going to allow other people to also exercise choice. If you live a life with dignity, you're going to allow other people to live a life with dignity. And so on and so forth. If you don't want to be made a slave, you're not going to enslave other people. That's the fundamental premise of rights itself, right? Because we say rights are for everyone. And the fact that if you get rights, that means you agree to the concept of rights and agree to giving rights to other people. Why is this important in this very instance? Because the existence of carnivores, by definition, takes away the rights of other people. Because you take away the meaning from their life, you take away any sort of feeling of safety from their life, and in most cases, you directly take away the right to life, right? So we say, sure, rights generally do exist, but if your very existence or the very existence of a being, by definition, takes away the rights of other people, we think that that being is out of the equation of moral justification. We no longer need to justify we don't need to defend their right to life, because by existing itself, they are taking away the rights of others. And based on the fact that you get rights only by agreeing that other people have right and agreeing to live with respecting other people's right, we think that these animals, carnivorous animals, don't have rights in the first place. So we're going to say that they're inhuman and they don't have rights. We're happy to kill them. Right. Secondly, we're going to stand on a principle of self-defense. So we think for everyone, self-defense is a principle, right? You have a right if you're in danger to attack, defend yourself from the danger by attacking that person or killing that person in given instances. As in, if you're in a dark alley, someone comes to murder you, you have a right to fight for yourself, right? Sadly, nature gives the ability to defend themselves on a disproportionate level. So a lion has much larger ability to defend itself from a threat than a bunny, for example. Now, the problem with this is it's arbitrary who gets this level of defense, right? So there's no fair reason as to why a lion gets a greater ability to defend itself than a bunny, for example. And we say for people who, for no fault of their own, are at the bottom of this hierarchy, for no fault of their own, are placed in a position that they cannot defend themselves, we think it's only moral and it's only fair that we step in as God to come and protect them ourselves, right? So we say everyone should be able to defend themselves. If you're born in such an unfortunate position where you simply cannot defend yourself from existential threats that live in your live around you and are part of society, it's only fair for us as a third party to come and enforce that self-defense on your behalf, right? And the third thing is about the thought experiment I told you in the beginning, which is moral love. So we say everyone in this hierarchy of animals, whether you're carnivore, herbivore, or omnivore, whatever, would all say yes to the question that we gave you in the start. If there's a person, a being that's higher on this hierarchy than you, a person that's stronger than you, whose life mission is to kill you, right? In that situation, everyone would agree to kill people who are at a higher position than them. Everyone would agree to protect themselves by killing the people who are above them. Now, for no fault of their own, animals like bunnies and deers and things like that are stuck at the bottom of this hierarchy. We say it's not fair on a moral level to allow other people to have this choice and them to not have this choice. And for that reason, because where you are in this hierarchy is arbitrary, you don't get to choose where you are. And for a deer, they don't get to choose to be the target of a lion. They don't get to choose to be ripped apart by a group of lions who's just going for a stroll. We think that it's a principal requirement for us to go and defend them, right? So very quickly, I'll touch on social benefits. Ainesh and Raghav will come and tell you why those are important. Firstly, what does this society look like? Everyone lives in a state of fear. Everyone's movements are curtailed. There's no way for you to go out. There's no way. You can't go to the park. You can't do anything. Parents will be scared while sending their kids to school. It's a miserable life, right? And we think by killing these animals, you get a chance to give everyone a better life. We're extremely happy to propose. And yeah, thank you.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for this speech. Please give me a second before we move on. Okay, I'd now like to invite the Leader of Opposition to begin their speech.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. If possible, could you please turn on your camera? And yeah, perfectly. So just mention your POI preference and give us a countdown for it.
Yeah, please ask POI via chat. I'll be monitoring it. And 3, 2, 1, here I go. So the motion today is that the House would, in an anthropomorphic world, exterminate all carnivorous animals. Now, the proposition had the burden to define the word or the phrase anthropomorphic world. They refused to do so, and in their ignorance, they just termed it the animal world. So with that, we as the opposition would like to give a general idea of what the anthropomorphic world means. So we're talking about a world where all species have gained intelligence, or like to some
Is it just me or is Shashwat?
Yeah, Shashwat,
Yeah, I think
Shashwat's cutting out for everyone.
I'm extremely sorry for an internet connection the problem.
Yeah,
you can restart your speech.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Shashwat, please
I'll
restart.
restart.
Thank you.
3, 2, 1. Here I go again. So the motion here today is that the House in an anthropomorphic world will kill all carnivorous animals. Now, the proposition has not defined the phrase anthropomorphic world for you, and they just assume and call it, in their ignorance, the animal world. Now, with that, the opposition takes upon itself the burden to define that phrase, And to a reasonable extent, when we say that all species on that planet have gained cognition that is in some form comparable to those of human beings. And now this is important here, because for any planet to have so many different species, there will be some form of an ecosystem. An ecosystem where you will have some entity of things that take the energy from the sun and are creating and synthesizing their own food in the process by photosynthesis, typically called the autotrophs. Now, understand, ladies and gentlemen, that typically these autotrophs, if we talk about our world and draw analogies to it, these autotrophs are plants. Now, I think it will be very fair if the opposition borrows the definition of herbivores and carnivores as to the current paradigm. So herbivores would be animals and entities that eat these plants or eat these autotrophs, which happen to be fairly sentient and happen to have cognition related to human beings. So the proposition comes up to you and tells you that, you know, we are merciful and kind gods, and we do not want to kill innocent things, innocent entities, right? But they kill all carnivores. They don't kill herbivores. Herbivores which will kill these plants and which will kill and eat these autotrophs by definition of being herbivore. And therefore, that is something they are endorsing. So with this, their moral high ground is nothing but 50 miles of crap. Because in their paradigm, they're still allowing and in fact encouraging the overkilling of certain sections of innocent of so-called innocent entities. Now, in essence, our argument is that of a naturalist. We are talking about the standard, yeah, I'll take that POI later. Now, the opposition here, we are talking about the standard balance of things. We are talking about an ecosystem. We are talking about an ecological balance. Now, when I use the term balance, I am automatically recognizing the fact that all parties need to exist for this balance to continue. So when we artificially remove an entire section of entities on this balance, of species on this balance, without even thinking about the nuances, because there is no nuance in their model. They're not picking and choosing with rational intent what species to remove. No, they're not doing that. They're telling you by their misplaced sense of self-righteousness that we are going to kill all carnivorous no matter what. So they have forgotten to consider any nuance whatsoever. And the opposition is telling you that that will inevitably upset the ecological balance and which will make certain species proliferate out of control because they don't have a natural check, because they don't have natural competition in the beginning, and they will run rampant and they will be very heavy on these sentient autotrophs. And the thing is, when that happens, when you remove any check on these species, it's bound to go out of control because nature didn't find a way to naturally accommodate all of these. You just decided that one party has to go en masse, and therefore without any thought to the same, you just suddenly removed a lot of competition, and suddenly a section of the species has a huge advantage, and suddenly they're dominating over the entire planet and doing irreversible harm to the same. And that is what the opposition is against today. So the opposition is telling you that that the proposition's entire moral argument is bogus, and two, that it is that in the natural state of things, it is important for the carnivores to have their place in the ecological balance. So do the herbivores, and so do the autotrophs and the plants. And we recognize that in this tendency, there is very little chance for them, for all of these entities, despite having human cognition, all of these entities to be in the same society generally. They are bound to group together because of the problem of food. As simple as that. The food has to come somewhere, and it has to come from the so-called plants. I will take a POI here.
Yeah. So presumably, given that these guys now have human intelligence, once they realize that population control is a problem, they can like come up with condoms or something. I don't think that's that big a question, a problem.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about so you're talking about population control and condoms not being a problem. I mean, we probably have human intelligence and we probably still have a population problem, and we probably are responsible for the extinction of a lot of different species. So I mean, I don't know what you wanted me to answer from that question. So as my team members will elaborate to you further, the opposition is telling you that the ecological balance has to be, if as gods, the house as gods is to upset the ecological or influence or intervene in the ecological balance in some way, there has to be some nuance. And killing all carnivorous species en masse will upset this balance, because the herbivorous species will have a field day and will proliferate out of control. And two, the opposition is also telling you that any moralistic argument the proposition has given to you is utterly bogus, because the plants have intelligence, who are innocent, and they have to make the food, and they have to be eaten for the herbivorous to proliferate, and the herbivorous will have to be eaten for the carnivores to proliferate. And the herbivorous will have to be kept in check. And due to the 10% rule we observe on the planet today, we know that we know that automatically the carnivorous population will be in check. And I am proud to propose, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. We now like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to begin their speech.
Okay, so first I would like to argue about what the LO had said about the definition of the debate. So we, the proposition, feel that his definition isn't in the spirit of the debate, as the debate is regarding carnivorous animals, and the debate is not is based on carnivorous and herbivorous animals and all animals, and not plants. So that does include humans, and that does not include plants. So we the proposition believe that we're just talking about plants in this context. Now we're going to talk about some of the points. I'll talk about some of the points which the LO brought up. First, he started speaking about the ecological imbalance, which I believe the Prime Minister, through his POI, had properly argued against. Because now we're in an anthropomorphic society. So this is a society in which animals have human-like characteristics and attain a certain level of cognition, and can start thinking at a higher level, and can evolve, and they will have some form of communication through which they can communicate with humans, and they'll have a lot of other human characteristics as well. So I believe that in this case, similar to how we humans have done, as the PM had mentioned, there will be some solution or some workaround around this problem of population control, such as condoms or some other method, such as maybe not even just like not having sex that much. Because we animals will attain that level of cognition and will understand that population control is a major issue, and it will lead to other major problems as well. And there will be solutions and workarounds to fix this issue. Also, now I'll be talking about some of the benefits that I believe will come if we end up exterminating all the carnivorous animals. So there are two main large benefits and outcomes which will come due to exterminating all carnivorous animals in this anthropomorphic society. So first is that there will be a lot is that we will have better outcomes, and I'll take the POI later, is that we'll have a lot of better social outcomes. So society in this case will include animals because we're in an anthropomorphic society, and as the PM had mentioned as well, animals who have, since they have attained this level of cognition and understanding, will also be brought into society and basically be treated in the same way as humans. So what is going to happen in this anthropomorphic society? Basically, it's like as the PM had mentioned in his example as well, it's like we have murderers just walking around. You are just an innocent person, and they're basically just half of the world is basically just are basically just murderers who are trying to come after you and trying to eat you and are trying to kill you. And everyone will just be living in this state of fear where you do not want to go outside, you do not want to and you cannot perform your basics, your basic functions in society. You cannot, go to the gym, you cannot go to eat food, you cannot go to work. Society will not function in this kind of world, because how can you work, how can you even think of being in a stable state of mind when you can't even, you basically are in fear of your life 24/7, and are in fear that, okay, someone might just jump through the window right now and kill you and eat you. So what do you call this, like denies, and this also denies a right to life from these herbivores, who again are at an unfair advantage. Bunnies are at an unfair advantage due to nature's random process, and will and we believe that herbivores do deserve this right to life. So these are the social outcomes, and now I'll go on to the economic benefits. So first of all, there is a huge problem with meat consumption. So the world will require the resources of 2.5 times that the Earth has currently in the next 50 years if we continue meat consumption. Meat consumption does cause a lot of ecological harm, and meat consumption wastes calories as well. So and also more stomachs will be fed if everyone is vegetarian. And these are several of the economic benefits as well. And also, if someone is fearing for their life, they will not be able to do their basic work, and they won't be able to do all of their basic, they won't be able to perform their basic societal functions, such as going to work and all of that stuff, because they are just in fear of their life constantly. And yeah, I'll take the POI. Srijan or Anirudh, whoever unmutes first, I guess.
Okay, so my POI was that right now you're seeing the economic benefits from the point of view of an omnivore, where there is a status quo, where there exists an ecological balance, and where there exists an ecological system. Can you imagine what happens when there is a rampant control, when there is no control of the population of the herbivores themselves, and they're eating other sentient beings, like as we said in our definition of grass.
Okay,
You're assuming
so
vegetarians are morally better.
yeah, I got it. Okay, so as I spoke about previously, we do not agree with your definition. We believe that this anthropomorphic society only considers carnivorous animals, and will only be giving these anthropomorphic traits of that humans have to only two animals, and will only be concerning animals and not plants in this case. So so we are obviously ignoring plants. So I believe that will take care of what you are talking about. And yeah, I believe that in this case, what do you call? Okay, and also now, even if we are assuming that their plants, like example of plants being in an anthropomorphic society, So basically, innocence is a quality that stems from human rights and not intelligence, right? So we see this because we are okay killing carrots, but and then it's basically saying that we're okay killing carrots, but we're not okay with killing humans. And yeah, I believe that we yeah, that's it.
I'd like to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for their speech, and I'd now like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to begin theirs. DLO, are you here?
Yeah. Am I visible?
Yeah, we can see you and hear you.
Yeah.
Just give us your POI preference and give us a countdown before you begin
I'll
your
take the
speech.
POI. Oh no, interrupt me. I'll answer if I have time. Okay, I will begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, I would like to talk about problems in the thought experiment that the Prime Minister gave. The thought experiment is inaccurate because, number one, it assumes that herbivores cannot protect themselves. It assumes that they cannot form communities, that they cannot build borders, that they cannot build walls, that they are completely defenseless creatures, despite being anthropomorphic and having human-like abilities. Second, it assigns this idea of innocence to plant-eating creatures only. Aren't plants innocent with respect to herbivores? Aren't plankton innocent with respect to krill? So this idea of innocence is relative. You cannot objectively say that herbivores are innocent and carnivores are not. Now I'll talk about the problems that they brought up with their entire argument about rights. Firstly, we need to redefine the entire idea of what is morally right and wrong. The only reason why killing is looked down upon in human culture is because humans can live on a plant-based diet without killing other animals. For carnivores, killing is as benign as farming. It is as benign as plucking an apple off a tree. Thus, this right to life cannot be applied in an anthropomorphic world in the way the government has defined it. The right to life for a herbivore only exists with respect to other herbivores or carnivores who don't eat them as food. The right to life of a carnivore is just as valid as that of a herbivore. A wildebeest has the right to not be killed by another wildebeest. It has the right to not be killed by an animal that doesn't hunt wildebeest. But a lion has the right to kill a wildebeest because the lion has the right to live as well, and killing the wildebeest is the only way that the lion can survive. You see, the government assumes that all animals must come under the same set of rights. In our world, the lion and the wildebeest have different rights. The lion has the right to kill the wildebeest, but not one wildebeest of another wildebeest. So it is possible in a world for different species to have different rights, and for one species' rights to not trump in others. In the current paradigm, a wildebeest in the world that we are living in right now, where only humans have anthropomorphic qualities, wildebeest rights are not being infringed just because a lion hunts them. For example, a person shooting a black buck is a crime, but if that black buck is hunted by a wild animal, then that is not a crime. So even in our current world, it is possible for different creatures to have different rights. Now, third is the argument that they brought up of self-defense. You see, this doesn't apply. Why? Because predators are very, very often killed by their prey. Lions are killed by zebras. They're killed by wildebeest who simply kick them and they're no longer able to hunt. Carnivore populations are far more vulnerable than herbivore ones because they're smaller in number and their food is far more difficult to get. They have to dodge kicks and run for hundreds of miles in order to get a single meal. Yes, I'll take your POI.
Yeah, would the speaker be appreciative of lions hunting the speaker in this apartheid state with different rights that the speaker is building?
Absolutely. Even in the current world, if you go on a safari and you are careless and the lion hunts you, the lion has not infringed on your right. The lion is not supposed to be put down. Animals kill human beings even in the current world and they are not put down. Why? Because that is what they do. If you threaten an animal's calf, if the animal feels threatened by you, it is allowed to kill you because it is not understanding what's going on. Now in our world, even if the lion understands what it's doing by killing me, it has no choice. If it is hunting me for food, then it is justified for it to hunt me. Now this brought up a very important point. The government argues that creatures have a right to not be hunted, that they have the right to be free from fear, that they have the right to not worry about their survival. Now, what you must notice is that all of these rights were made by Homo sapiens for Homo sapiens from a position of superiority over all species. Notice how we are the only species on Earth with this right currently. Notice how no other species possesses the right to be free from fear, to be free from being hunted, to not have to worry about their survival. Every other animal on Earth has to worry for its survival. Every other animal on Earth lives on fear. Why do we possess these special rights? Because we are superior, right? Because now, if you look at a paradigm where all animals have anthropomorphic species, no one class deserves these rights over the others. Herbivores do not deserve this right, special right to be free from fear, to have the right to not be hunted, because every other animal on Earth has the same right. The ideal that we are looking for is equality. The idea that we are looking for is where every species feels the same, and it is not possible for one species to be free of fear when the other is not. That is why in our paradigm we cannot remove carnivores. This is the moral argument why we cannot remove carnivores. Now let us talk about pragmatically what will happen. Yes, I'll take your POI.
Yeah, sure. So talking about innocence, we say that plants don't come under the equation of innocence because they don't have rights, because that's not what, and innocence only comes from rights, which is, yeah.
Right, so you can try to escape this entire idea of putting plants as non-anthropomorphic beings, but you see, creating plants as anthropomorphic beings in our world is completely fair, right? Because in our world, no one species has right over the other. Just as herbivores have the right to eat plants, carnivores have the right to hunt animals, and nobody is innocent. This idea of innocence only applies when you are hunting not for food. So like in our world, let's say if a cat kills an animal and it doesn't have to, then we agree with you that that is immoral. But if a lion is hunting something for food, there is no morality involved. It is required for its life. It is hunting for its life. It is the only way that it can survive. Now we will explain to you why do we want them to survive. We told you morally why they should be allowed to survive. Now we'll talk pragmatically about why can we not remove carnivores. You see, there is a 10% rule, right? Carnivores can only take 10% of the energy that herbivores take from plants. Thus, in our world, herbivore populations will always be at least 10 times bigger than carnivore populations. As compared to on your side of the house, where there are no carnivores, this balance is disturbed. There is nothing keeping herbivore populations in check. Now, I know you brought up the point about how they can practice birth control and all of that stuff, but I think that has been sufficiently countered by looking at what human beings have done to the environment. We have destroyed thousands, if not millions of species. We have created disastrous climate change. We have destroyed biodiversity all around the world. And we are completely intelligent. We are completely aware of our actions. We know exactly what we are doing. If we allow herbivores to run rampant on this world, what will they do? They will only harvest the plants that they require to eat. Now, there are lots of plants in this world that herbivores have no use of, but they're very important for maintaining an ecosystem and very important for maintaining the environment and biodiversity. None of these plants will be allowed to survive. In your world, ecological collapse is inevitable. Just as we see in the human world, ecological collapse is happening before our very eyes. And this is when we are the only species on Earth. Notice that we are only one species on Earth with this ability to harvest whatever we like and having this intelligence and capability of doing this. Imagine when there are thousands upon thousands of species. Each and every one of them are going to work for their own gain. They cannot reproduce with each other. Their survival is at odds with one another. A cow has no incentive to work with a horse. So all of these species are working for themselves. All of them have anthropomorphic abilities. All of them are going to change the environment to their liking. You are going to lead to complete environmental collapse on your side as compared to on our side.
Anirudh,
Yes.
I'd like to inform you that you're 45 seconds beyond your time. So
okay,
please
just to conclude, I would like to say that we are proud to propose, and that if you have current technology, then maybe lab-grown meats could allow them to live in harmony. But if they are not allowed to live in harmony, we believe that we should not interfere with the natural order, as the natural order is the only thing that allows everybody to live together and survive.
Just give me a second.
All right.
Right. Thank you, DLO, for your speech. I'd now like to invite the government whip to begin theirs. Please mention your POI preference and give us a countdown before you begin.
Before I begin, I think this is important to my speech, and I think you could reveal this, but I'm not sure. But is it safe to assume that whatever Anirudh said after his time stopped, you have not considered in your aging?
We don't consider anything after 7 minutes 15 seconds.
3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition has gone as far to suggest that the only way for humans to avoid continuing this ecological collapse that we've generated is to allow lions and tigers to begin hunting us again, because that is the right thing to do, because the way nature evolved is the only way forward in society. Moving on. I will cement the idea of how an ecological collapse is not going to happen in our side of the debate. In fact, it's going to be avoided even more so within our side of the debate, as this argument was brought up by our first and second speakers, primarily our second speakers, regarding calories, 2.5 times Earth, etc., etc. So you get a point of reference. As the opposition brought up proudly, every time a carnivore eats a herbivore, he can only get 10% of the energy that the herbivore has been fed. So in some sort of, in another example that illustrates the same thing, you feed a cow all its life, what, 10, 15 years, you feed it every single day, 3 times a day, just so that you can have 1 week worth of beef. Obviously, this is a bad method of sustenance. What is happening here? You're wasting calories. That is simply it. And the only thing that's going to stop population collapses is getting everyone's stomach filled. And the only way to do this is to not waste calories. How do you not waste calories? You stop consuming meat. This is the world that the proposition is built, where there is no longer any consumption of meat. There is better efficiency in calories. Now, we've already cemented the fact that it is not within the spirit of the debate to consider plants as becoming sentient over here, because within the motion, the word carnivore is explicitly used, and the word carnivore is only brought up in the context of omnivore and herbivore, and these 3 terms only occur within the bubble of animals. So it is obviously safe to assume that only animals were supposed to be considered within this debate. Moving on, the opposition tries to argue about population explosions because animals are left unchecked. Whereas if you look at the current human trends, humans are left, we don't have any natural predators remaining. How is our population trajectory? We have boomed because of technological advantage, but our population will come to a peak at around 2050. I'm assuming this is common knowledge, but it is simply because of the invention of birth control. Our population boomed before birth control existed. When birth control started, our acceleration of population growth started flattening out, and we might as well dip in the future. So it's safe to assume that once these animals are anthropomorphized, they will have access to this birth control, because they will have access to all of the technologies that we have access to. So within this world, what the opposition is doing is the opposition cannot disprove that there is ecological balance within our world. There is better caloric efficiency within our world. What the opposition is essentially doing is opposition is building an apartheid state, because the opposition suggests to give different animals different rights. What is the basis of the opposition giving this sort of thing? This is based upon the fact that in real life, different animals have different rights per se. But every animal is anthropomorphized here. They have an equal consciousness to that of humans. So the opposition's comparison does not make any sense at all, because everyone has a similar level of consciousness. Everyone deserves a similar level of sense of security, because everyone has a similar sense of fear, and everyone has a similar outlook towards life. So obviously, giving different species different rights and suggesting different species build up walls, etc., is only going to start an uprising and a war that will kill more people possibly than the people that we are killing. Because even the opposition agrees that there are 10 herbivores for every 1 carnivore. And this war will kill far more than that. Moving on. the only directions that we can move forward in now is we can respect the common norms of society, wherein if you murder someone, you are exempt from having regular rights as to humans, because you're clearly inspiring fear. How we've established in our first and second speaker, you're inspiring fear into the anthropomorphized deer family, because they can't send their child to school because you are allowing the tiger to eat the deer. Oh, that child is killed. What happens if a tiger comes to your child's school and kills your child? I'm absolutely certain that you want that tiger killed before it reaches your child. And the opposition blindly seems to be ignoring this. So, moving on. This fear argument alone should win the proposition, our debate. But the opposition seems to be ignoring this quite explicitly, because they continue talking about some sort of extinction event of species that will occur. Now, the proposition cares about the extinction of species because the proposition cares about every single species equally. Why does the proposition care about every single species equally and then ends up giving every single species different levels of rights? Because apparently now, in the context of rights, these species are not equal anymore, because the tiger is superior and the tiger should not care if the deer is killed because the tiger wants to feed itself. How is that send any message of equality to the deer family, where the deer child just wanted to grow up to become an astronaut? The tiger is ending all possibility there. The only right way forward is to build a society that is entirely based upon herbivores, because when the society is entirely based upon herbivores, then you cannot justify killing to fill your stomach. And the only way we can do this is when we cleanse the world of these carnivores. That is what the proposition is doing. All right. So, moving on. Carnivores are killed sometimes is this argument that the opposition brings up. The lion can get killed by the deer while the lion is hunting for the deer. This argument is brought up by the opposition. Now, notice the hypocrisy within this argument, because over here the deer will be arrested and sent to jail, because according to the opposition's definition, the deer doesn't have the right to kill the lion. Only the lion has the right to kill the deer. So the deer, for self-defense, will be sent to jail. And the lion, and if the lion kills the deer, then it's fine for the lion to feast, in fact. And this is simply unfair to both the communities of deer and lion. It will begin an uprising. The opposition's built world will collapse in an instant, because humans war against each other for murdering each other. Imagine that multifold, because animals are eating each other and we have ensured them that right. That is simply an unstable country, and the proposition's model is far more stable, and probably the only way to live in an anthropomorphic world where all animals have been given anthropomorphized. I'm sorry, I slipped up on the word. So with that in mind, I'm very proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the government whip for this speech. And now I invite the opposition whip to begin theirs.
Am I audible?
Yeah, we can see and hear you.
Am I visible? Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, I'd like my POI through an interruption, and since I'm asking for a POI through an interruption, if I'm exceeding my time, then I'd also like, just like a warning or a check, that I am exceeding my time. Yeah, I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. It is very disappointing to see that side government has completely failed to understand the burden of this debate, and they have not considered an entire species, that is the plants in this world. When side government brings up that motion consists of only carnivores, they are forgetting, first of all, very ignorantly, that carnivorous plants do exist. This is very sad to see. And they are also forgetting that in our world, in our present world, plants play a very important role in this ecosystem and in the circle of life, right? So I'd first like to talk about the government whip's argument about how we have not talked about ecological collapse, and basically I'd like to continue the DPM speech, DLO speech, right? So when we are saying that there is an ecological collapse, the side proposition does not account for locusts and pests and stuff like that, which are which are herbivores and which have the capability of destroying entire civilizations and entire worlds. So side government does not understand that without a particular check for these locusts for these particular pests as we know it of today, then these will go rampant without any need for without any need, and they will have no check to keep them and to keep a balance in this ecological society, right? So what we are is that what we are saying, and the government has clearly misconstrued our argument about what we understand as self-defense and what we understand as rights, right? So when they're talking about difference, right, as what happens today, obviously when somebody self-defends themselves for their right to survival, we have been continuously saying that we are providing the right to life instead of the government basically exterminating every carnivore that is present in today's world. We are providing them with the right to life, right? And and in a protection of this right to life, a very essential protection of this right to life is the right to self-defense. So obviously, if a deer, while self-defense, kills the tiger, then there is no question of arresting the deer because it was in his own right to defend, right? The government also brought about a thing of fear where he brought about the point about the sending your child to school and what if he gets eaten or something like that, right? So when we are telling that in the motion given itself, the Thai government is proposing to exterminate all carnivorous animals without a doubt, right? So you are punishing people for crimes that they haven't even committed. You are punishing people just based on their eating habits. When side government tells that we have no basis for our arguments, side government then comes up and tells that just because they eat a particular type of food, we are going to eliminate them and we are going to exterminate them. Then this is no different from an ethnic cleansing, right? And this is why we on side opposition are so against this, right? So the next point that side government is very proud about and they continuously bring about in this argument is the calorific efficiency. And we would like to just say that calorific efficiency, the whole argument about that is invalid, as the meat consumption allowed for the evolution of bigger brains, right? So meat consumption is not bad. It is only humans and then mass production of meat that is the problem, and this is why it creates a calorific problem, and this is solved on our house, on our side of the house, right? So, and let me tell you what we got from side government today. Side government gave us a lousy thought experiment where they told us what if a deer is standing out, what if a tiger is standing outside a deer's house, and the moment the deer steps out, he will be killed. First of all, the deer should not take law into his own hands, right? The deer should not take law into his own hands, right? He should be informing the necessary authorities, and like we have said, self-defense. That is the entire argument about fear is broken down in self-defense. It is something that happens even in today's world, even in today's world where only we are anthropomorphic or whatever, or only we have the human-like abilities. I will take it later. We are saying that we are going to choose that deers do have the right to self-defense. That herbivores at this point of time are still defending themselves, and side government does not remember that they need not be in the same society. In lieu of self-defense, to protect their rights, to protect their own life, they will form their own community, and it is fairly obvious. We don't need to tell them we don't need to prove a very logical argument about why they will need to provide a herd amongst themselves, but it's fairly obvious to move on with their own lives, and for protection, they will form their own herd and they will form their own communities where they will be able to continue with this self-defense. We have told you on our side of the government why biodiversity is important, why it is necessary that carnivores keep herbivores alive for their own survival. This is something that side government has completely ignored in their arguments, right? They're continuously forgetting that the existence of herbivores is essential for carnivores, but that is not the case in the other way. So side government has come and told us that we are creating an apartheid system, but what they are proposing is an ethnic cleansing based on absolutely no crimes that the animals and the species have committed. The DPM, in his argument of saying while trying to give in their model of trying to give them more freedom, the DPM literally proposed that we will stop animals from having sex, and that would be a way of having birth controls, thus imposing more restrictions and more restrictions on how these herbivores can live their life. I will take that POI.
Wait, Aadarsh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So how exactly do you propose a bunny is going to protect itself from a tiger? Your argument seems super strawman to only the big carnivores. Sorry.
Okay, so in the same way that a bunny is proposing, a bunny is defending itself in today's world, right? Why are we assuming that just because both, and we know that from the given definition and from the given motion itself, that both of these gain the same amount of sentience, right? So whatever. So the present status quo does not have to change. However, a bunny is defending itself right now against the tiger. In the same way, it will defend itself again. In the same way, it will defend itself in the future as well. And also, we are proposing that they form their own societies, that we give them a different set of rights. That throughout our models that we have basically told you how it will defend yourself, and this POI was a complete waste of time. And so basically what we are saying is that their argument about moral principles goes right out of the window after my DLO speech. Their argument about social benefits goes right out of the window after my DLO speech. Their argument about economic benefits is just stupid because they have not thought about what the repercussions and what the importance and how exactly calorific waste does happen. And this is why, just by presenting you a solid model, a solid definition, and very good arguments, we take the debate, and I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Opposition Whip, for your speech. I'd now like to invite the leader of Opposition Reply speaker to begin their speech.
Yeah, can I get an audio reminder when I'm running out of time?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I will begin in 3, 2, 1. Panel, let me summarize the government's entire argument for you. Firstly, they say that herbivores' rights trump carnivores' rights. This is central to their argument, and they try to justify this throughout the debate. Now, why do they claim that herbivores' rights trump carnivores' rights? They say because herbivores are innocent. This has been successfully countered by the opposition when we showed you how plants are innocent with respect to herbivores, so nobody is inherently innocent. Moreover, we also showed you that it is not easy for carnivores to hunt herbivores, that herbivores have a right to defend themselves, and that in our world, herbivores are not the victims. In our world, there are no victims, as carnivores more often than not will fail to successfully hunt these herbivores. They need to work very hard in order to hunt. Now, the second argument that they give is that herbivores are better in a calorific sense. That what they said is that you can have more herbivores on Earth as compared to if you had both herbivores and carnivores. And this we agree that obviously that you will have more herbivores on Earth if you kill all of the carnivores. But they fail to show you why this is better for Earth. Why is simply having more herbivores better for the planet? What do you accomplish by having more herbivores on Earth? In fact, the opposition showed you why having more herbivores on Earth is a problem. Moreover, we also showed you how keeping only herbivores on Earth does not prevent conflict. It does not make life easier. Why? Because we showed you that herbivores will be competing against each other. Every single herbivore species, as we told you, has its own interests in mind. Thus, they will inherently anyways always be at odds with one another, and conflict is inevitable. Simply on our side of the house, we are not eliminating an entire fraction of the Earth's population on this arbitrary basis of innocence. Now, what other constructives did you get from the opposition? We showed you how this entire idea of applying human ideals of this right to be free from fear comes from a position of superiority, and that this superiority no longer exists in this animal world, where every single species has anthropomorphic characteristics and every single species' interests need to be considered, and every single species follows its own interests. Please understand that they have no incentive to collaborate with each other. Removing carnivores does not create a harmonious wonderland for the herbivores. As the whip explained to you, they are still going to be pests. They are still going to be herbivores who want to grow their population, who want to consume at the cost of other herbivores. It is an inherently, it is a world which suits the survival of the fittest, and it's every species for itself. Now, in the opposition's paradigm, the rights that the opposition is giving you, where every single species has its own set of rights, it is only in our paradigm that every single species' rights can be protected, that no species is considered superior to one another. The proposition, on the other hand, has multiple times wrongly understood the opposition's arguments and have claimed that zebras would not have the rights to defend themselves against lions, etc., which has been sufficiently countered by the opposition. Moreover, by completely ignoring animals, we feel that the government has missed out on defining this debate properly, and the opposition has taken that charge and exposed a glaring hole in their arguments. And so, to summarize this speech, I believe that the opposition clearly takes this debate, as we have proved to you that on our side of the house, we are more moral, we are more pragmatic, and that we ensure the survival of planet Earth.
Thank you, opposition reply speaker. I'd now like to invite the Prime Minister reply speaker to begin the speech.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, hello, really sorry. My mom had just got. Yeah. Should I turn on my camera for this?
Yeah.
Good. All right, I will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, right. So let's look at this lens from how the opposition want to look at it, right? I'm going to start off by conceding, for the time being, everything they want. Let's say that the ecology does collapse in 50 years after we do this. Let's say that they do win that entire clash. Why do we still think we win this debate? And then I'll talk back again about the ecology, right? So first of all, we need to talk about the motion, because this has been misunderstood multiple times. So what is an anthropomorphic world? I honestly didn't know before the context you gave us the context, which said it's like Zootopia and a world where animals are humanoid. I think it's fair on our side to assume that plants are therefore not humanoid and don't have these human rights. I think that's just a misunderstanding that came up, but it's fair on our side to do this based on what we were told in the motion. Okay, so then let's actually look at the rights, right? So they tell us they give rights to all animals. Clearly, they ignore the first argument that I gave. Why rights are a bargain and why carnivorous animals don't deserve rights in the first place. They don't have rights, which makes their entire thing of, oh, carnivores have a right to life and they can kill whoever they want. It goes out the window because they simply do not address the issue that I bring up, which is why they don't have rights in the first place. If you buy that argument, which you basically have to because they didn't rebut it, then this entire idea of they have a right to life to kill, like to survive, goes out the window because they don't have rights and hence we can do anything we want. Right. Then we talk about self-defense. And here they tell us, look, sometimes there's a wildebeest that kills a lion. Very strongly, because they only talk about huge herbivores that can actually protect themselves to a certain extent. We tell you there are tons of animals, bunnies, all sorts of things come to mind, where they simply do not have the mechanism to defend themselves. And then they say, look, it'll be like the status quo. What happens in the status quo? These animals get eaten indiscriminately. And we say we don't want that. That's immoral, that's bad, and we're happy to stop that, right? And then the next thing they rely on is idea that innocence is not a thing. And we simply say that this does not stand in this debate, and Ainesh told you why. Because the idea of innocence itself is a human construction that derives from the fact that you have human rights. You're innocent because your right to life does not deserve to be cut off, right? That is what innocence means. So when we say that plants don't have rights, as given in the motion, they are not humanoid, they remain as they are today. Today, we don't say plants have rights. We don't say you're a murderer for plucking a carrot off the tree, right? They don't come from trees, but whatever. You don't say you're a murderer for killing carrots. But yeah, so if their level of rights remain the same, the plants are not innocent with respect to herbivores. There's no question of innocence because they don't have rights in the first place. So the idea that plants are innocent and hence we're still supporting murderers simply doesn't stand, right? Then so this is why we think on a moral level, even if the ecology was to collapse in 50 years, we simply cannot do this unethical act. We cannot allow the world to remain in the way it is. We cannot allow innocent people to get hurt, to get killed, to get ripped apart, families to be torn for no sensible reason. We simply say, even in the worst case where the world goes to hell, we're happy for it to go to hell if we protect innocent people. Right. But now let's actually talk about what is happening. Firstly, society. Ainesh gives you plenty of reasons why society will get wrecked. Because A, you're literally living a life of fear. You can't go out, you can't work, your mental state will be absolutely screwed. The only response you get to this is like, look, they're going to compete amongst themselves anyways. Yeah, we put to you that it's worse to not be able to leave your house because you're going to get hunted and killed than to have to fight with someone else, right? As a human, I would rather have to compete with you for a job than know that someone's going to kill me the minute I step outside my house. I don't think that is anywhere comparable. And then the next thing they say is like, oh, look, hunting is hard anyway, so it doesn't matter. We think how hard it is to hunt simply does not come in the moral equation, right? Now let's talk about the ecology. We've given you a couple of reasons why the environment doesn't get screwed. We've talked to you about caloric impacts. We've talked to you about how you can actually feed more people. We've talked to you about how the environment generally becomes better because we get rid of carnivores. And we also talked to you about how these animals are, how herbivores are intelligent in the first place, right? Now, so when Raghav tells you, look, when we had this technological boom, we had a huge population blast, and then it's coming down because we've understood the problem. We think that this will continue to happen. The ecology will continue to get better because everyone is now intelligent. But we say on a moral level, on a principle level, you simply cannot do this. And for that reason, we're very proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Reply Speaker. The archers will now leave the call. We'll return in approximately 15 minutes and we'll give you the verdict then. Thank you for the debate. Can you guys see me? Hello.
Yep, what's up?
Okay, cool. Just give me a few seconds before I begin. Where's my mouse?
Wait, did Shashwat leave the chat? Was he busy or something?
Opposition, can you call Shashwat back or something? I don't know.
Yeah, we've tagged him.
Cool.
Okay. Fine.
Why isn't my scroll wheel working? What is this? Okay, fine. Yeah, scrolling is going to be awkward. You'll see my hand, but yeah, anyway. Okay, fine. So I'll be beginning in 3, 2, 1. So firstly, for the verdict of the debate, me and Joel both thought that the government bench took this by a decent margin. So firstly, coming into one of the major flaws, I'll get to this later, but major flaws on the opposition side is the definition of the way you guys chose to define the debate, that plants are also considered as people. Me and Joel both felt that this was an unfair definition, especially given the clarification asked by Aadarsh and the clarification given to it, in which he very clearly stated that animals are portrayed as humanoid and with human intellect, and essentially the society will be constructed where animals are living together. Now, given that clarification, this considering that plants are people does not stand at all. Apart from that, also the opposition's arguments were extremely messy. I'll get to this later. This is what I want to talk about later. But first of all, I'm going to go over the overall cases that we get from both sides. Firstly, starting with government, this will be a very short summary, given that there's not too much to talk about here. Mainly we get, so the first main argument that we get is a principal argument, which is founded on the basis of herbivores are innocent in the society and carnivores don't deserve rights because by existing they violate the rights of others. So essentially, based off of that and based off some explanation, the government proves to us that A, carnivores don't get rights, B, herbivores should be the owners in the society, and C, it is morally correct to essentially eliminate all of these carnivores from society. Government also tries to talk about economic and social benefits. Economic benefits along the lines of when people are living in constant fear of their life, the economy will not prosper. People will not be able to go out and do their standard things like doing their jobs or living their lives or anything that's necessary for society to function, which will lead to societal collapse and obviously following that economic collapse and other obvious flaws. This has been talked about very extensively throughout the government speech, so I'm going to move on to opposition. So this is what I want to talk about a lot mainly. So from opposition, we get a few arguments mainly. We get one main argument that animals have rights to hunt other animals solely for the purpose of food and consumption. We also get a second argument about the collapse of an ecosystem since you remove the system of checks and balances. Third, you give us the argument that herbivores specifically, can herd together and form societies to protect themselves from these carnivores. And fourth, that there will be inter-herbivore conflict on the government side, and that's a problem. Now, one by one, I just want to go through all of a few of these. Firstly, starting with inter-herbivore conflict, this is something that we felt was inexclusive, will exist on both sides of the house. And thus it didn't really hold much weight. You didn't prove to us why this inter-herbivore conflict will solely exist in a society where there are no carnivores, and not when there are both carnivores and herbivores. So this argument didn't weigh much. Coming to the animals can herd from societies, this all falls under this whole self-defense category and this whole right to life, and essentially the structure of society in this model, which is where the main messiness in opposition's case comes. So I'm just going to give one main example. This is essentially regarding the survivability of carnivores and herbivores, and how herbivores will protect themselves and how carnivores will survive. Now, this comes up in a lot of POIs, this comes up in a lot of speeches. So in a lot of POIs and obviously speeches, it's said that herbivores will survive the same way that they survive in the current status quo. Rabbits will simply run away from these tigers and lions that are hunting them. And obviously in the current status quo, rabbits run into their burrows and hide in places where lions can't reach. So they'll do something similar. They'll be running and hiding, and they'll essentially follow their same survival practice that they do normally. And you also come and bring the argument that herbivores will somehow, while doing this, also set up a full-blown society and set up some system of defense where they can defend themselves from the hunting carnivores, while also doing the exact same thing that they do in status quo, which doesn't make much logical sense and essentially are conflicting arguments from your side. Then coming to the idea of carnivores surviving, you make the argument that even though there will be death of herbivores, there won't be that much because carnivores actually have a very hard time to hunt these herbivores, and even more so in the current status quo. They won't be able to hunt that many. They won't be able to. It's a very difficult job, and obviously carnivores will have a much harder time hunting these animals. But also there's the idea that carnivores will actually survive in this model, and carnivores will actually be able to successfully hunt enough herbivores so that they don't go extinct on their own. And again, this is a very conflicting logical thing that I found in your arguments. And a lot of similar arguments, not exactly similar, but obviously such things of such style, they're like similar things have been brought up throughout your debate, where you make arguments of one kind, you also make arguments of another kind. Essentially makes your entire case extremely messy and very hard to credit. So the main things that we can credit from opposition are essentially the one and main thing that personally I've only credited from your side is essentially your attempt to prove that animals have rights to hunt other animals as they need to. This is the only thing that I found to be truly consistent and at least logically stable in your arguments. Your arguments about ecosystem collapse again become very awkward when you bring up the idea of herbivores and carnivores forming different societies and living separately and herding together. And obviously a lot of these end up contradicting each other. And so essentially, all in all, on a much bigger picture summary of the debate, firstly, coming to the principal arguments that both of you guys have made, where opposition tries to prove that carnivores have a right to life and carnivores have the right to eat animals if they need to, like for survival. And where government comes and gives us a thought experiment, where government comes and proves to us that the herbivores are innocent, government comes and proves to us that carnivores don't get rights. In this class specifically, the government takes it significantly for both the edges. Coming to the pragmatic benefits, this is something that I found very difficult to judge. Opposition had many like logical failures on their side of the house when it comes to the pragmatic benefits that they try and propose and essentially how their society will function. And thus and in the end, this didn't really seem like a clash at all. It was just both sides trying to make arguments on either side of the house, and the opposition seemingly tripping itself up while doing so. So all in all, for us, mainly because of the very clear win in regards to the principal argument, and essentially the lack of true engagement, the lack of comparatives drawn with regards to the pragmatic benefits and the societal status on both sides of the house, we felt that the government takes us to it. Joel, do you have anything to add?
Discussed about the same things. And like it was upon this discussion that like Abhijeeth just made the announcements, right? Does opposition or government either side have any questions regarding the OA? Any questions at all? Or do they feel like something was unfairly judged or something? So we can explain it better.
Could the just be specific about the logical contradictions?
So I think,
okay,
yeah, Abhijeeth, go ahead.
Okay. Do you want me to explain the ones that I mentioned in my speech or the ones that I referred to as simply etc.?
all of them.
Okay, so firstly, regarding the survivability of herbivores and how they will enact this self-defense that you guys have suggested. So, first of all, in multiple POIs, and especially this is something that's very clearly brought up in Srijan's speech in a POI, I think from Aadarsh, essentially the idea of a bunny protecting itself from a tiger, and essentially the idea that society, this is something that's brought up in other speech as well, essentially how society will function similar to how it is currently functioning, like an animal society, an animal ecosystem, where these carnivores will eat these herbivores, and these herbivores will do their best to defend themselves and survive the same way they are currently. This is something that's brought up through other speeches, and something that's brought up in the POI is that a bunny will protect itself from a tiger. However, a bunny protects itself right now. And also in a response to the same POI, we get the idea that herbivores can also form their own society. Herbivores can also set up infrastructure to defend themselves. Herbivores can also do something of this scale, which is very, very, very different from the way they protect themselves right now. I'm pretty sure it's fairly obvious that bunnies aren't building walls and forming societies to protect themselves from tigers. So this is one logical fallacy that I pointed out with regards to the survivability of herbivores and how they defend themselves. Next, coming to the survivability of carnivores. So again, throughout your speeches, this is something that this is something that popped up once for me, at least, that I very clearly remembered. Essentially, there was an argument made that the death of herbivores won't be so extreme because carnivores find it very hard to actually hunt because they have to run around, they have to go chase after these herbivores. These herbivores will be protecting themselves in self-defense. These herbivores will herd together, and thus carnivores will find it extremely difficult to successfully hunt these herbivores so that they can, and thus there won't be many herbivore deaths. But at the same time, the society that you guys paint is sustainable for carnivores to survive in, and thus carnivores will obviously be able to hunt enough herbivores to survive, which is, as you guys also mentioned, 10 times the number of, or a certain number of, a certain multiple of the number of carnivores, which is a significant amount. And apart from this, I'll just look for some of the ones that I mentioned. Do you have any questions regards to these two first?
Yes.
Yeah.
My question with regards to the first one is, I thought it was clear that when he said that when he gave the example of how rabbits are hiding in their burrows right now, he was trying to say that, well, they already know how to run away from tigers. I'm just clarifying what that meant, but I get that you took it in the sense that they're two different scenarios. It was meant to be a comparison, but okay, fine. The second one, the second contradiction that you brought about was about the population, right? So we told that it's very difficult. I was talking about the current context in which lions are killed by zebras in hunting. So there is already a system of checks and balances whereby the carnivore population is not booming. It doesn't spiral out of control because it is tough to hunt. So I don't see how that is mutually exclusive with a stable population.
Right. So the way I understood your argument, I can't speak for Joel in this regard, is that essentially the herbivore population will not be so threatened, and the herbivore population will not be in such a dismal scenario as the government paints it out to be, because these carnivores find it extremely difficult to hunt these herbivores in the first place, and they'll find it even more difficult to do so in the society that either side paints, is what I understood from your argument. It's unfortunate that's different from what you said.
I think it's pretty important to discuss what your idea of setting up the system of rights is and what government's idea was, right? So I think what opposition tried to do was very interesting. Like, I could appreciate what they were trying to do. They said that because these are different tiers of systems, because like carnivores can't be placed on the same level as herbivores, which can't be placed on the same level as like some other systems, that they don't have the same system of rights, right? And like they try to create a comparative saying that humans also establish a right system because they're objectively superior, and like this superior species need to have their own system of rights, right? Now, okay, the question comes to the first question that comes to my mind is exactly why is it that genetic composition decides what a right system is, right? And this is something that government came and proved to me how right systems are set up, right? Rights are set up by a system of consciousness, right? If consciousness is awarded equally to all beings, the same sentience and intelligence is awarded equally to all beings. And if sentience is what decides the ethics that people live by, or like the rights that people live by, then we can also decide that the rights that all animals get are based on that same consciousness that all beings get, right? So this is the argument that government set up for how exactly rights are set up in any world, right? And in this case, the anthropomorphic world. So I could believe this much more significantly than your entire system of argumentation saying that because they're genetically different, because they're different tiers of like parts of the ecosystem, they deserve different system of rights. Something that like couldn't logically be proved to the extent that government was able to prove to me that
But didn't I
rights
say
are
like the
as a
carnivores
consequence
don't
of.
have the choice? Like, didn't I specify that the carnivores have no choice but to eat the herbivores? That is why it is not morally wrong for them to do it.
So exactly right. That's what the entirety of the PM speech was, right? Does the right to what right to life exist? I mean, right to life exists if it impedes. Does certain rights exist if it impedes on the rights of like the rest of society? So I think you could have dealt with this. Isn't like a flawless argument, right? You could have dealt with it more like properly if you went along the lines of like what you try to do, saying that. Uh, like rights are definite if there is a tangible harm seen upon this thing and can't be preemptively decided. All these things you could have said, but you didn't say, right? But
Like what?
I mean,
Like what? Sorry.
but we did bring up that different that all these entities need not be in the same society, right? So I mean, they can be in like different societies and they can formulate their own rights for themselves. So I mean, even that part was like brought about by our side. So that particular thing so they may be like different sites and segregated
so,
societies.
okay, this was also another problem with opposition's system of argumentation, right? So what you do is you create separate systems for principled arguments and you create separate systems for pragmatic arguments. When you bring these two together, you see that they don't really mesh well together, right? You say they create separate societies. That's what Abhijeeth was talking about. You say that they create separate societies for forming the system of rights. They isolate themselves from each other. But at the same time, these societies need to intermingle. And certain societies have higher positions where they're allowed to hunt these lower societies or whatever, right? So it's fine to create these like systems of argumentation, but when they're isolated from each other, when you don't consider the whole picture, it becomes very problematic and very hard to assess as a whole condensed argument, right? And when we're creating a comparative with government that gives a cohesive case of why a right system exists, of why how rights are defined as a consequence of sentience and not as a consequence of like physical capabilities or something like that. It's very hard for like you to go ahead and prove these things. Again, remember that something the government told me that sentience is what decides rights, and you told me that consumption behaviors is what decides rights. And I don't see how consumption behaviors can trout.
No, I mean, what we tried to say is that a lion's when a lion eats, like even if you give a lion sentience, it has no choice but to eat a herbivore. Like, so that lies outside the realm of sentience. It has no choice. It's not in its will to eat the deer or not. So that's why you cannot judge it as right or wrong. Like that's what I argue.
And like, see, that's exactly like I said the same thing again, right? It's just government proved to me how certain rights can be denied if what do you call the rights of like society in general are being harmed. If like a large portion of this thing don't have decent quality of life, and if removing people like that's why they made this assumption that they were God and they could remove instantly anyone who could cause harm to like certain sections of society, to remove them like unharmfully, right? So if their mere existence was an objective harm upon the rest of society, then it is justified that their right to life doesn't exist anymore. That's what they were trying to prove, and that's what they proved pretty effectively.
Okay. And when it comes to the carnivore population, like what did you get out of that? That carnivores, the population of herbivores will be kept in check. Like it'll be in balance because carnivores cannot hunt herbivores with ease and
okay, so carnivores, so basically the whole argument of ecological balance, right? That carnivores acts as a system of checks and balances. Again, this is like problematic because of the contradictions that you set up, because they form separate societies, because they have separate right systems and all of these things. They can defend themselves. They can give it to proper authorities. All of these things you said that couldn't really, that like diminish the effects of this argument, right? And then as a
I mean,
consequence, you
but
told me
then
that.
like the pests thing, that's what aids us in this particular paradigm, right? That that in their side of the house they are removing a chunk so abruptly, and you have things like pests and locusts which are still sentient, and they can still like end entire habitats of like plants and such.
Yeah, I didn't get that example either, right? Because on both sides of house, pests can and destroy entire plant habitats. What?
No,
How is that
pests
Yeah,
will be kept in check by birds that eat those pests and
I
so on.
said that there will be no carnivore to keep the locusts and pests in check, so their population will increase without any need for them to keep it in control.
And this was backed up, and I said that every species will act in its own interest. So they can't come and say that no,
I mean,
they're sentient, so they won't eat more food.
all these examples were in defense of the whole ecological balance, right? I mean, that's the entire thing, that these locusts won't be able to end entire habitats if the birds are eating them, and so on and so forth.
I mean,
So
I don't know.
essentially, for me specifically, wait, Raghav, just give a second. This becomes like, so essentially, when you try and mesh all of your arguments together, right? So the arguments for the ecological balance, where you have different animals thriving in different levels because of the absence of another animal. And you also have this idea of that in your world, there'll be literal societies, things that, at least from what we've heard, sound like literal countries being formed for different animals. Literal towns or villages are very well structured, very well protected, very well segregated, very well separated. Societies will be formed. These two
So
things don't mesh together. When you talk about the idea of an ecosystem, when you talk about the idea of like 6, 7 different countries neighboring each other, they don't mesh at all together. So when you talk about your arguments for ecological balance, when you talk about your ideas that these locusts are going to invade the crop plantations of different species that they're using for their survival. When you talk about all of this, it gives the picture that all of these animals are living in the same space together. And
And
then
not only
when
that,
you
right? Another problem is you make certain, you take, like this was also something that we discussed when we were discussing the decision, right? You take parts from like one reality, this current status quo, and you take parts from other reality, that is the anthropomorphic world. So you say that the pests from this reality, which consumes without any rational thought in massive land, like scopes of agricultural property, is being considered in this anthropomorphic world, but the vegetation is being sentient in that world, or like normal herbivores are being sentient in the world. If pests are also sentient, then we assume that they also have certain rational thought. They aren't going to,
Yeah, but we
massively
justified why they
I
would
mean,
act. We also
survival.
justified that these species
It's
would
for
act in
survival.
its
No,
own
no, but dude,
self-interest, right?
you guys
So that
also
we
justified
that they
that.
would continue to consume
No, but Anirudh, at the same time, you guys also justify that these herbivores that are being attacked by these locusts, whose our plantation are being destroyed, will also have this structure to protect themselves from these pests. The same way they protect themselves from these
I mean, the pests
carnivores.
are the herbivore in this thing, right? The
The
pests are
pests
the
are the
herbivore.
herbivores, but the pests are still the invaders on that society, right? The same way you guys structure it as when a lion comes and attacks a society of zebras or whatever, they're going to defend themselves. You can't say that they'll only defend themselves against lions and they're not going to defend themselves against these locusts that are coming and destroying their lives.
They
That
won't
argument,
always be successful. That's the point we're making. We're not saying that they'll always be successful. I mean, our ecological balance depends on the fact that they will be successful some of the times, and that's the point of competition. That no one is successful all the time.
and because
I
you have
think that
different parties acting in their own self-interest, like we also showed how conflict, you don't reduce conflict on the government side of the house.
But conflict exists on both sides of the house.
Yes, but we did that in response to a government's claim that they would be warring on our side of the house.
and they would, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now again, this is where something else pops up. If you take I mean, of course, now that we're painting it as a larger societal structure, if you paint it as a large societal structure, then don't these locusts coming to eat the pests of, say, eat the crops of another country essentially become war? Isn't the lions attacking the civilians of another country, essentially war. So
Yeah,
that's essentially the only place where it made sense. Like all of your arguments meshed together for me once it reached a state similar to the current world scenario, except each country is populated by different species. And every single interaction now that is one lion hunting one deer or one locust eating one crop, assuming it's not their own that they're growing in their own country, is essentially an act of war now. And that's where when government calls out this idea of war, at least for me, that's where it hurts them, where it hits your model the most. And yeah, I mean.
wait, but doesn't the war exist on their side of the house as well? So how it isn't an attack
So
on us. They're simply
no,
saying
no.
that
So
it's the
So
same.
it's a
Anirudh, the
wash,
thing
right?
is,
You don't prove anything on either side of the house. If that's the core like thing that you're trying to prove, and like if it exists
No,
on
we're
both sides
trying
of
to
the house,
prove
then what's
that
the point?
pragmatically they have no benefits, and that it's only on our side of the house that ecological balance is maintained.
No, but there
But
is far lesser war on our side, right? Because there's far lesser of these quote unquote invasions. Everyone's living in a cohesive society rather than different species in different places, and there's no predators to begin wars, etc.
I mean, but like if you're living in a cohesive society, then our point stands, right? That every species will be at odds with themselves, even if they're living in the same.
But your point was based upon the fact that you're not living in a cohesive society, right?
No, it still stands, right? Even if they're living in the same societies, locusts can consume the crop.
Yeah, but your point was based upon the fact that they're living in separate societies. Ours
We never
wasn't.
specified.
We never specified that as a definition. No? That was a
We did
hypothetical we addressed.
I think you explicitly said that these people will start building walls and forming up societies of their own to protect themselves. You said that, right?
They can. They can. Yeah.
This was brought up as a rebuttal, and this was brought up multiple times, and at least to anyone spectating the debate, it was assumed to be your case. If it wasn't your case, then I mean, I don't know what to say.
look, I think more or less like what was supposed to be like simple principled argumentation where you could compare like the principled benefits of like whether right to life exists. You made it like overcomplicated by like bringing in autotrophs and bringing it whole. Yeah, so like again, when you like it was pretty simple to like deal with. You could have gone along like very simple like principled argumentation saying that in an anthropomorphic world, it isn't necessarily everyone isn't necessarily going to be at odds with each other. Carnivores aren't necessarily all going to be evil, aren't necessarily going to be continuously seeking harm on herbivores. That cohesiveness isn't an impossibility, and preemptive prevention of criminality isn't justified when you're wiping out an entire population in like when you create these when you consider
like,
these realities, right?
Are we supposed to justify that carnivores will still be allowed to eat herbivores?
I mean, yeah, I think you look. I think you were trying to. I think you tried to bring it up like towards the end of your like very end of your speech where you talked about like what in a world where meat can be cultured or something like that. I don't know, right? But basically, what you could have said, not something that I isn't in an way we're supposed to say. What you could have said is preemptively judging someone's criminality isn't justified. After they commit the crime, are we only allowed to?
Wait, so then for that you have to concede that a carnivore eating a herbivore is a criminal act.
Yeah.
Which will be a problem because then by definition they'll be criminal. By definition of being carnivore, they'll be criminal. And that,
yeah, like I get the point of saying that carnivores are not evil, right? Because when they kill and they eat a herbivore, I thought it was understood that it's not evil, that this is something that they have to do. I think we proved that this is something that's required for their survival. So that's why it's not evil.
Look, but then trying to justify it through like setting up system of rights based on like consumption and shit was like very weird, dude. Like, so what else can I say?
Do you have any idea about how like we could have done it? Like
Also,
anything that you expected us to say?
There's one thing. I'm not sure that works very well either, the preemptive thing, because then we would just come up and say, okay, kill them after their first meal.
Exactly.
Don't think that really stands like.
And even then, I mean, you guys like the prop began with the fact that these that carnivores are by definition but carnivores. So if you say that killing and eating another animal is a crime, that's when we lose everything, because by definition they become criminals. It's over then. Like the game's over
we
for us.
cannot concede that killing and eating is a crime. Like that's
Exactly.
the entire. We have to prove to you that a carnivore hunting a herbivore is not a crime. Like
Because
what
they have to do it by definition of being a carnivore. At least, I mean, that's one definition of carnivore we can stand on. We can't redefine carnivore to be like something else entirely, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I thought I didn't see any point. I thought a lot about cultured meats, but like I didn't see the point. I thought that would just be like trying to run away from.
We also thought about cultured meats.
I don't know why you chose like the first motion as your priority. That's why we were like super confused right at the beginning. Both the teams chose the first motion as the priority. It was super weird. I literally don't know what was.
The Marxist motion we didn't understand, and the Iron Man motion. I mean, we didn't have time to read the Iron Man motion because we were reading the communist motion.
When we were discussing these motions before the debate, like right as you guys were picking, I thought that like the second motion at least seemed very government favoring, and Joel thought it would be a blowout for Rob. And we were very confused about this as well. Yeah.
I mean, we thought that we would do the plant thing and the ecological balance, and we would draw parallels from our world, and those would be like very strong arguments, because you have to concede the fact that that carnivores will have to hunt to eat. So yeah, that was our line of reasoning.
Like I didn't see any other way of justifying that eating, like hunting and killing another anthropomorphic being is justified, other than saying that this is something that they have to do, that is the way that they're genetically disposed to do, they cannot survive in any other way. Like, I don't know what else can I say? How else can I justify it?
Shit, I literally don't know, right? That's the thing. It was like very weird of you guys to choose the motion, because I think making the assumption that autotrophs are like.
I mean, see, that's where we thought that it's entirely on our side, like 100%. We were like, we'll just say that any moral argument.
But then Ad said Zootopia.
I mean,
but they never mentioned it to us, right? We saw an anthropomorphic world, which means everything on it.
It would be nice if Zootopia was then put in the context.
Exactly,
because,
exactly.
For that I could draw a moral comparison that why are you saying that carnivores are bad?
We did ask for that
in the chat.
In Discord on a public channel.
What is okay? This is unfair now. Do we expect it to the Discord channel? Like, what is this? And we were
this was before the motions were chosen as well. Like while you guys were choosing.
Motion choosing time. This was clarified.
No, I mean, it was never explicitly said that you will not hold a definition. And like just out of curiosity, had you held the definition, would you have given the case to us?
Wait, what?
Sorry,
if we didn't.
Yeah. So if plants had conscience, I think we don't have a case anymore. If plants have rights.
Even sentience would. Yeah, and that's what we thought, that this is like a landslide for us, because plants have conscience, and then the prop can't do anything about it. And we were like, that's it. We won. That's why we put it.
Like I thought all we had to justify is that then I thought that maybe there would be arguments about like they have to like bite them, and they have to scratch them, and they have to like kill them in that way, and then you argue that rats can't feel pain and all of that.